Hello and welcome back. Here's another short lesson. This is going to be about spacing. Now I've already prepared a page here and you can see what it looks like. This is the page loaded into the browser. What I've done is I've just created a very simple wrapper, and inside the wrapper you can see I've created a header with an H1 and H2, and then a main area that has a whole bunch of paragraphs in it, and then at the bottom I created a small footer, and then this right here is the end of the wrapper. I've created some CSS. I've made the wrapper 800 pixels wide, given it margin auto so it'll be centered in the page. I've made a solid black border, but I've made the top of the div have no border because I'd like that to go up and meet the top of the page. But the right and the left and the bottom are 1 pixel. I gave it a light blue-gray background color, and aside from that I made the footer, but that's just pretty much it. It's a very basic page. It just has a wrapper, title, subtitle, and then some text and a copyright at the bottom. Now there's a couple things that you might notice. First of all, the text is really close to the edge, and that's not good. What we've got to do first is that we've got to make sure that that text does not come that close to the edge. And the way to do that, of course, is to add padding to the wrapper. Now, you probably want to do this to the wrapper because the wrapper contains everything else, and we want everything to be away from the edges. So I'm going to add padding, and just to begin with, let's take a look at what 10 pixels looks like. So I'm making it 10 pixels, and now I'm reloading. And here you can see that we've got a little bit of padding, a little bit of space. But at least in my opinion, this is not enough. I personally do not feel comfortable if the padding is less than 30 pixels. I would consider that kind of a minimum for the padding, for the amount of space between the edge and the text. And see, that's what it looks like now. I think that looks a lot more normal. It could be a little bit less, but I kind of like about how that looks. Now, you'll also notice that we've got some problems here at the top. We've got some space here between the wrapper div and the top of the page. So that is because the body has a default margin of about 5 or 10 pixels. So what we need to do is that we need to make a body selector in the style, and we need to say that the margin will be 0 pixels. If you make the margin 0 pixels for the body, there will be no extra space, and you'll notice that the top of your wrapper will now meet the top of the page. And so it looks like it's just going off the top there, like we can't see the top. Now you don't have to do this. You could create a gap between here. You could put the border across the top of the wrapper div. I just kind of like the way this looks. This is one way to do it. Now, one other thing that most people don't think about is what it looks like at the bottom of the page. You'll see that my wrapper ends at the bottom of the page, but once it stops scrolling, there's no room there. So there should be at least a little bit of space beneath the end of the content there, beneath the bottom of the wrapper, so that there's kind of like a margin at the bottom. Now, you could do that by putting a margin for the body. You could say margin bottom. One way to do that would be to say 0 pixels, and then say 100 pixels. So this means that it's no margin at the top, no margin at the left and right, but there's 100 pixels at the bottom. Another way of doing it, maybe a little bit more simple, is simply to add padding. As you recall, padding and margin will both add to the spaces. So padding, I think, actually might be better because padding is inside the body rather than the margin usually being outside of it. So I think padding might be better in this situation. In this case, I'm going to use padding bottom, and I'm going to add 100 pixels. Now, it doesn't have to be 100 pixels. It could be less than that, but again, if you use 100 pixels, then when you scroll to the bottom, it looks like that. And you can see that now we have a nice comfortable space beneath the bottom, and it looks like we just have a nice margin down there. So I think this looks a lot better for spacing. This is what I would recommend. Once again, make sure that the body has a margin of 0. that there is padding at the bottom of about 100 pixels, and that your wrapper also has padding. I recommend at least 30 pixels to give enough space between the text and the edge of the wrapper. And that's all I wanted to point out in this lesson.